The leading characters in Marvel's forthcoming Eternals movie, assuming, as all things, that COVID leaves us alone, may seem familiar to those versed in myth. Athena, Icarus, Ajax, and Phastos have direct roots in ancient Greece. Gilgamesh is the Mesopotamian protagonist of what is widely considered the first piece of literature. This is far from the first time superhero universes have dipped into a grander mythology. Thor, Loki, and Odin are found in both. Wonder Woman is the daughter of Zeus. Even before tales of superhuman ability graced television, film, comic books, or radio, their roots in mediums such as penny dreadfuls and simple newspaper panels tell stories of crime fighters like Hugo, Hercules, and Spring-Heeled Jack, referencing an earlier folklore or mythological belief. In a quickly changing time of advancing technology and proliferating mediums of storytelling, the entire market around these stories, how they are told, and who they are told to is shifting at an equal rate. Yet certain characters and ideas remain prominent in both. Iconic personalities such as James Bond, Dracula, Robin Hood, and Batman have become tools for mass marketers, preying perhaps on intrinsic cultural values. In today's film, heroes don't need names like Thor or Hela to maintain mythological grandeur. Their structure and themes do that work regardless. New York Times writer Mark Bowden claims that 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming retells the story of Icarus. Icarus, or Spider-Man, ignores his father, Daedalus, or Iron Man's warnings, and, draped in wings by his father's invention, flies too high and plunges to his death. Wonder Woman, released that same year, is an ancient Greek-themed retelling of the epic poem Paradise Lost, where Lucifer or Ares rebels against God or Zeus. These retold stories, however, are simply that. Stories. A true cultural mythology exceeds that. It wells from the belief and behavior of the populace, not created by any one person. Even Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, for example, are just single versions of a story that had been told for many generations. According to Belgian psychoanalyst G. Marion King-Gay in The Master Myth of the Modern Society, myth is never meant for entertainment. It instead reflects a worldview. A true, living myth is often unrecognized as such, like the gods on Mount Olympus or the fanciful ideas of America's frontier. Myth-making is not meant for stories, but survival, King-Gay claims. Myth grows from every human culture, and none has ever lived without it. Mythologizing today is often looked at as an inferior mode of thinking, when in actuality is an implicit belief system. An absence of myth would mean an absence of all meaning. Because of this, it can be tricky to identify the current mythos until that belief system changes. The three main types of myth are creation, destruction, and heroic. When studying these ideas across cultures, it becomes clear their intent is to provide meaning through narrative experience. Psychoanalysts have always looked at classic tales as studies of human behavior. Freud did this with Oedipus, and more recently Stephen A. Mitchell did with The Tale of Icarus. In psychoanalyst Malcolm Slavin's article, Meaning, Morality, and the Search for Reality and Reciprocity, he approaches the concept from an evolutionary perspective. Survival and adaptation is less based on biological instinct and more on the transmission of culture and knowledge. As humans develop, so do the need to use subjectivities of other minds to understand our surroundings and self. In other words, story becomes a template for navigating the world and understanding what it means to be part of a larger community of people. American comic books, for some, can be a catalyst for creating legends. Superman has become a historic symbol through stories and merchandise constantly created. Superman can be rivaled with historic characters such as Alexander the Great or even old tales such as Jack and the Beanstalk. In the last century, the mediums on which stories have been told have virtually exploded. Writers and creators can do things that would be impossible in other mediums. With audio and visual working in tandem in film, the viewer can hear a message on a television in the background that's reaffirming a subliminal message or theme in the story that they're absorbing without even fully registering. This is opposed to comics or novels, for example, where messages have to be more blatant. 2016 Swiss Army Man is a great example of this. In a movie about a corpse who floats away by farting into the ocean, emotional music, shot composition, and framing give the viewer an automatic emotional response they may not be immediately aware of. With these new mediums comes a new speed at which content is produced. Production companies have proliferated, news cycles have shrunk.
Do you, when you look at something like Star Wars, recognize some of the themes of the hero throughout? mythology?
Well, I think that George Lucas was using standard mythological figures. The old man as the advisor. Well, specifically, what he made me think of is the Japanese sword master.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
I've known some of those people, and this man has a bit their character.
Technology has completely changed a consumer's relationship to stories. With the Puma Media, though, there are fewer new concepts than might be expected. Production companies stick to certain characters such as Superman because they're familiar. An example of this is 2018's Robin Hood. Taking a character which already has over 70 film adaptations, a heavy theme in the film was the 1% versus 99 wealth disparity. What was once perhaps developed from a core human interest in a character, such as Superman as the symbol of unadulterated hope, is now being used as a writing and marketing tool. Like a paint-by-number set, a viewer can look at a Superman or Robin Hood type character and fill in gaps that the storyteller doesn't need to because of the way story and myth work. King Gay discusses the myth of no myth, that our society having no myths of old is in itself a mythological idea. In other words, the scientific worldview of finding truth in our surroundings is an example of today's mythology. Objective truth is another example, King Gay claims. People tend to believe that there's a higher, impersonal, detached truth, yet there is no aspect of hypothesis forming separate from subjective reasoning. One of the most interesting things about Greek mythology is that the gods weren't perfect. They represented ideas across the board like war, bloodlust, and death, yet they were still looked up to. Through celebrity figures today such as the Kardashians, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump, there are aspects of our culture which do and have always mimicked that idea. This is also escalated by technology, especially social media, as people can, so to speak, become among the gods.
First time anybody made a tool, taking a stone and chipping it so you can handle it, that's the beginning of a machine. It's turning out of nature into your service. But then there comes a time when it begins to dictate to you. I'm having a bit of this trouble with my computer.
Your computer?
Just bought one a couple of months ago, and I can't help thinking of it as having a personality there because it talks back and it behaves in a whimsical way and all of that. So I'm personifying that machine. To me, that machine is almost alive. I could mythologize that darn thing.
Nuclear weapons, what could perhaps cause humanity's end, is an extreme example of this. Climate change, too, is not a machine but a byproduct of one. Through film and story, rhetoric and conversation, this idea prevails. In Janice L. Dickinson's synthesis, The People Paradox, Self-Esteem Striving, Immortality, Ideologies, and Human Response to Climate Change, she compares anthropologist Ernest Becker's idea of immortality projects to current cultural attitudes toward climate change. Becker argues that people tend to hold tightly to worldviews which put them at an ease. This can be compared to today's climate change deniers, Dickinson says. Belief in technology, materialism, conservation of nature, or God can all act as catalysts or hindrances for sustainable practices against climate change. Apocalypse, being one of the three main types of mythology, is common in most cultures across time. From the Norse to Christians, Aztecs to Cambodians, claims author and mythologist Michael Meade in his book Why the World Doesn't End. It seems to be, just as the case of Robin Hood as a transmitter for new belief. This mythic structure has funneled into our society's fears. The advancement of technology and artificial intelligence leads to climate change, leads to housing and food insecurity, leads to apocalypse. Myths give us narratives of hope. They provide models of surviving hardship that interpreters can construct meaning from, giving tools to move through a challenging life. These fears are apparent in human behavior, methods of communication, and what is created. It is seen in The Terminator, The Matrix, I, Robot, and Black Mirror. It is seen through symbols of resource depletion, like Thanos, or the power shift between flesh and machine, like Ultron.
Peace in our time.
Eternals is another minuscule entry in this eons-long conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, our Eternals.